Good evening, everybody. This is Lieutenant Colonel Darren Dennis, National Recruiting and Retention Manager for Civil Air Patrol, here this evening to talk to you a little bit about scheduling and how you can use scheduling and communication to improve the retention in your squadrons. So I apologize for starting a couple minutes late. Got a new webcam tonight and trying out some new features, and didn't work as I expected. So if you'd like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature that's on the right side of the screen. Over to, I'm going to point in the exact wrong direction, but I believe it's over in this direction. And you'll be able to ask a question and I'll see it. Now, I won't see it right away because usually while I'm doing the presentation, I'm not looking exactly over there. So we'll get started here in just a second as I bring up the correct screen. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can use communication and scheduling to improve the retention in your units. So let's go to screen share. And of course, the screen I want is never the screen that's up. That's how it always works with me. There we go. Okay, I hope everybody can see me, by the way, or hear me, I should say. I believe the audio is working correctly. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use scheduling and communication to improve your retention in your units. Now, I tell you what, I've been doing this a long time, and I'm sure I'm like a lot of people. I certainly don't like to scramble around at the last minute and have to deal with poor planning and things like that. I have a tight schedule. A lot of people have tight schedules, and they want to know in advance what's going on, and they don't want to have to run around and suddenly pick up the ball and run it in for a touchdown at the last minute if they don't have to. So it's important to understand, everybody is busy these days. This is 2018. Families are more active. They're more likely to be mobile, and they're doing more activities per day, per person than ever before. That's just the nature of the beast, if you will. That's how it is. Travel, sports, extracurricular activities like Civil Air Patrol. Moms and dads have their own activities. There's siblings. There's a lot of things that really take people away from being able to participate in Civil Air Patrol, or have to plan to put it in. So it's important that we're actually being cognizant of that when we plan and schedule our activities. I know for a fact my mom never was real happy when I told her at the last minute, "Hey mom," our meeting was on a Wednesday, and I had to tell my mom, "Hey mom, on Friday we're doing this," and my mom was like, "First I've ever heard of it." My mom tolerated Civil Air Patrol a lot, but part of the reason was that my squadron back when I was a cadet didn't do a very good job of planning things far enough in advance. So keep in mind that the average American family these days get less than 45 minutes together in a day. So when people are scooting from one place to another constantly, they're going left, right, and center. Again, the important thing here is that they have to be able to fit Civil Air Patrol into their busy daily activities. Okay, so that's where the scheduling part comes in. So we have to make sure we can help our members to do that with doing our part as commanders, as staff officers, in making sure that the units are scheduled correctly. So to reduce, your member and member family frustration, missed activities, low participation, and really improve your member satisfaction with their participation in CAP, we've got to do a better job of just locally planning and executing with a clear schedule. This will help maximize your member participation, and they'll make each event worthwhile. Otherwise, they'll just stop making the effort to fit in. And honestly, that's what you don't want to hear from somebody is, well, I like Civil Air Patrol. It was really neat, but I couldn't find a way to get it to fit my milieu, or I could never come to anything. I mean, I'm a pretty busy guy, and it seems like every time I want to go to a SARX, it's on a weekend I've already got something scheduled. All right, we've got to make that effort to try and unschedule or reschedule things. So, personally, I'm scheduling things out like 6 weeks or maybe even more in advance. And knowing something, 90 days out is even better for me. It gives me time to plan my other activities, my kids, my skydiving, things to do with my wife, stuff like that. Civil Air Patrol is an ancillary activity. It's not a primary activity. So therefore, you have to make sure that you're giving people the opportunity to find where they can fit it in their schedule and easily fit it in their schedule. Okay. I mean, think about it like this. You always hear from people. I mean, I've said this many times. Man, if I'd have known about that activity before yesterday, I could have gone to it. But nobody ever says, oh man, I got way too much advance notice of that activity. So also keep in mind, the regulations actually demand this kind of scheduling, and communication. It's both a cadet program's best practice for unit management, and it's a cadet protection requirement for parental awareness. Google Calendars linked to your website can serve in this way, Facebook calendar, whatever you want to use, but have one. Okay. And while it suggests that this be at a minimum of 2 weeks in advance sort of notice, I'm here to tell you that if you're working with that short of a leash, you're really not making it happen. You really need to push that event horizon further out. Just going to take a quick look over at the chat here real quick. Boy, I got a lot of people on today. That's fantastic. Making sure I don't have any questions. And if I do have questions, that's great. I'll try to answer them. This is actually going to be a fairly short presentation tonight, so it should be pretty good. Here's a great example. Here's my my squadron's calendar, okay? And this is just here in November. And actually, there's a few things missing from that. We're not exactly perfect, but you can see that there's a lot of things that a unit could be doing just beyond meetings even. There's a lot of activities. And if you're not sharing that information, if you're not putting that information out, if your members don't know, and if your cadet parents don't know, people are not going to be able to participate in those kinds of activities. So scheduling is kind of important. You really, when you're overwhelmed with things, if you're a new commander or a new deputy commander for cadets, it's easy to get overwhelmed, okay? So it's very easy to shorten your planning and execution horizon to just a couple of weeks or less. Remember, normal people don't operate on a schedule like that. You really should have what amounts to like basically 3 rolling calendars in play at any one time. That's not to say that they're actually 3 separate calendars, but if you think of them like 3 calendars, it'll help you. Your long-range calendar is things like encampments, conferences. Maybe you've got an ops eval coming up in the spring of next year, and you want to remember, okay, yeah, May is always ops eval month. Got it. This allows your members to plan their participation for really important things. People sometimes have to bid vacation some months in advance, depending on their job. Not everybody can walk into their boss and say, hey, boss, I want a week off next week. Doesn't always work that way. I wish it worked that way, but it doesn't. So if you even said, yep, encampment is in July. No, it's November. You don't need to know that encampment is July 17th to the 22nd. Or maybe you do, or whatever the date is. Maybe you do, but you don't necessarily need to. But knowing that it's in July, knowing that it's in the summer is important. Now, if you need people to pin down dates for at the beginning of the year, if you want to make sure you have encampment staff, then you need to pin those kinds of things down. If you want to make sure that your cadets are planning and their families are planning, who wants to get right at the encampment deadline and hear from a family, oh, if we'd have known, we would have scheduled our Cape Cod trip for a week later. But, junior's going to Cape Cod, so tough luck. Now, most encampments, for example, they already have their dates picked out for next year. So by November, you should know. You should have that in your calendar. So just keep in mind, that's your long-range calendar. A mid-range calendar, that's a better, more detailed understanding of your objectives that are going to follow your current cycle, usually about the next 90 days into the next quarter, that sort of thing. This helps you start to sequence your training as well. For example, if you're able to look and say, okay, the wing always has a rocket weekend in October, then maybe in August you're working on rockets, or you're talking about rocketry in July and August. So you're leading up to your things. You start to synchronize your training calendar with your higher headquarters and that kind of thing, and you can look at that. Nobody wants to, schedule map reading for the 2 weeks after the field event. No, you want to have map reading. You want to have basic pace count. You want to have something like that before you take your cadets out in the field, not after. So that's the kind of scheduling you're trying to do. You're trying to do that with your 90-day or your 60-day schedule. The short range is where you really start to operationalize all this stuff. That's your 30 to 60 day sort of event horizon. You're assigning your instructors or your project officers, you're reserving the vehicles, you're getting the facilities, that kind of thing. You may have done those things further out, but but that's where you're actually people are starting to go, oh yeah, that's coming up. Gotta remember. Okay, good. And there's an old military maxim for planning. It's called the 1/3, 2/3 rule. And basically the idea is that if you're a commander or somebody who's preparing for this kind of thing, you want to use 1/3 of the time available to do your planning and leave 2/3 of the time available for the member or in the case of the military, it's a soldier or an airman, to plan and prepare their aspects of it. Okay, and that's really a good goal. If you think, okay, look, in the end of the next quarter, I want to have a squadron bivouac. Okay, you're going to spend this month planning it, and then you're going to give everybody 2 months to actually plan their aspects, get their pieces and parts, get their tent, get their equipment, etc. But if you say to them 2 weeks before, hey, we're going to have a bivouac in 2 weeks, the guy goes, oh man, I don't have a tent, I don't own a sleeping bag, I've got to get, I have to get these things together. You didn't give your members enough time to plan. But roll that calendar, keep it going 6 to 12 months in advance. I should know approximately, maybe not precisely, but approximately things that are happening in November 2019 already. My squadron just had every year we do a Veterans Day presentation. It was actually yesterday because the college that we present at is going to be closed next Monday. So they do it usually the Tuesday before Veterans Day. So we did that yesterday. Now, on my squadron calendar, the Tuesday before Veterans Day 2019, I should already have, tentative date for New Hampshire Technical Institute, Veterans Day presentation. That's easy. You just did it. Might as well stick it on there. If it's going to be around the same time frame, even if you don't know, just stick a placeholder date in there, put in there date tentative, do whatever you have to. Then somebody looks in and goes, oh yeah, it's right around this time. Good. Now people are thinking about it. So the other thing is with scheduling, and this is really important, is communicate that schedule. Okay, get that schedule. It doesn't matter really how you do it. Okay, but have several avenues. Maybe you've got a monthly email that you send out as the commander or the deputy commander for cadets that has 4 to 6 weeks of scheduling, so moms and dads can be planning ahead. Maybe you have a Google Calendar on your website that people can add to their phone or tablet, and they can see their schedule right alongside the parental schedule. That's always the thing. I'm like, look, we've got all this tech. Why don't we use it? I personally have my squadron schedule right there alongside my personal schedule on my phone. So when somebody says to me, hey, do you want to do something this weekend? I can look and go, oh man, I can't. I got a SARX. Okay, that's great. So it's important to do these kinds of things. Get that schedule in the hands of parents. Some people like to print them out. That's fine. I'm not a big fan of that anymore. I mean, let's face it, who looks at their refrigerator for their schedule anymore? Everybody looks at their phone or their tablet. And remember, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. If you have 2 avenues of communication for this, chances are everybody will see it. If you only have 1 avenue of communication, then somebody's always going to miss that message. Okay, so the more avenues you can have, if you put your squadron calendar up on Facebook and it's on the Google Calendar on the squadron webpage, and you're putting out an email thing every other week with the calendar in it, hey, that's great. That's multiple ways you can do it. Some people look at Facebook, some people look at email, some people look at the squadron website, whatever. So just remember, no matter which way you go, though, you'll keep your cadets' parents happier, your senior members more engaged and active, and your entire squadron chugging forward on the same page if you're all working off of a calendar, which is a plan, right? So speaking of communication, let's talk about the communication aspect, because this is another thing that units have a tough time with, and it's one of those kind of things that we all could solve this one. We talk about communication. We have modules in our senior member training about communication. The cadets have things in their leadership materials about communication. Yet we always seem to be stuck on transmit and not transmit and receive. So it's important to think about this. So how many times have you been here, right? You're standing there at the end of the meeting. The commander's got his notebook out. He's looking at you and he says, maybe it's the ES officer, not the commander. And it's like, okay, we have an ES bivouac next weekend. And there's a cadet out there in the group, and he looks at his buddy standing next to him. He's like, ES? Like, what's that? Like shrugs his shoulders. And his buddy shrugs his shoulders and goes, yeah, and bivouac? I don't understand. Not everybody may understand what we're talking about. Our organization has a lot of interesting words and tricky turns of phrase. And it's key to make sure you're not speaking way over the heads of your members, your parents, your prospective members, and that sort of thing. I can't tell you the number of times from a recruiting standpoint that I see this kind of thing where people are talking about high-level concepts, Curry voucher, encampment, orientation flights, Mitchell Award, IACE, whatever they're talking about. And they're talking about this to somebody who has no clue or hardly any clue what Civil Air Patrol is, and yet they're throwing all these high-level concepts at them. I'm like, whoa, back up. Instead of saying Curry achievement, why don't you say the completion of their first achievement? Instead of saying encampment, you can say our summer encampment, which is like a summer camp. Things like that. It's important to get kind of concrete with people. Okay. I don't know, maybe some of you are older, some of you are younger. You've seen some of this. You might remember this movie, but one of my favorites from back in the day was Robin Williams here, asking the lieutenant if the VP was such a VIP, shouldn't we keep the PC on the QT? Because at least the VC, he could become an MIA, and then we'd all be put on KP. So that's always one of my my things is, who knows what KP is these days, but this is an example of unnecessary jargoning. Okay. A lot of people do this with new cadets or seniors or parents. Not everybody knows the terminology, especially parents and new cadets. And next thing you know, you're saying alpha flight, and the parents are like, alpha flight. And you say, oh, Papa flight. And the dads all move over to one side of the drill hall. You're like, no, dads, come over here. That's what we're talking about. So be concrete in what you're saying. Spell it out a little. You're not actually talking on the radio, so you don't need to be quite as, you don't have to have that like super brevity. It's not that big of a deal. A lot of people think I got to talk at 500 miles an hour and be super brief. So I got to use all the abbreviations and, spoken acronyms and that kind of thing. No, keep it simple. Okay. Think about your audience. Think about their experience, knowledge, interests, that sort of thing, versus your experience and knowledge and interests. I've been in Civil Air Patrol 37 years. Okay. I've probably forgotten more about the program than a lot of people will know. Maybe not, but my point is that if I'm talking to somebody who's been at my squadron for 37 minutes, they're not going to know hardly anything. And I have to remember to speak in very concrete terms. And that goes for parents of new cadets. That goes for parents of current cadets. That goes for new members. You have new senior members. They don't know what a level 1 is. They don't know what a level 2 is. They have no idea what TLC is or SLS or EIO. They don't know any of this. So think about that audience. Make sure you're thinking hard about what audience you're talking to. And at the same time, have an appropriate message for an appropriate audience. Segment your communication or target it at specific groups for whom the message is most relevant. Asking for encampment training officers to a room full of cadets is not helpful to them or you. Likewise, talking up rocket competition to the senior members, apart from maybe garnering support for the event and getting somebody to drive the van, isn't always helpful either. So think about who you're talking to. If you just want to talk about, quote unquote, I'm going to say this, but basic encampment, which I know it's not basic encampment anymore, but if you want to talk about in the first year encampment experience, then why don't you get all of the potential first year encampment cadets in a room, as opposed to saying, hey, let's talk about encampment, and all the cadets that have already been to encampment are like, yeah, I know all about this. And so segment that training, segment that communication. The other thing is, take a minute and explain the why. Why is this interesting to you? Okay. If somebody says, and I've seen this, I've done this, I've accidentally done this, and it's no shame, I'll admit. Okay. Don't forget the pumpkin festival next month. Sign up will be later, but don't forget it. Okay. Meanwhile, there's probably 20 cadets standing there going, pumpkin festival? What's that? I don't like pumpkin. Okay. So a better example might be you say something like, hey guys, next month is the Christmas Pumpkin Festival. This is our, absolute maximum fundraiser here. It brings us almost $4,000 that we're going to use to defray your activity costs and pick up no-cost uniform items like those squadron t-shirts you're wearing. And remember, this activity supports the squadron, so this is why we need your help to support it. Okay, that's important. That's absolutely key. Candace, you're absolutely right. The 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. But make sure you're explaining these things in a fairly concrete way, okay? Because if somebody doesn't, you get more interest if somebody understands what's in it for me. How is this going to benefit me? Pumpkin festival, I don't like pumpkin. No. Hey, we park cars at the pumpkin festival and they give us money for it. We use that money to do activities. Okay. Oh, I like to do activities. Cool. Another example, and I hear this all the time at my squadron too, is, somebody will stand up and they'll say, hey, we need more cadets for Cyber Patriots. See Lieutenant Schmuckatelli for some details. Okay. There's somebody in the back of the room there that has never heard of Cyber Patriot. Guarantee it. Guarantee. Either one of your cadet parents who just walked in the door standing there going, the cyber what? My kid's not a Cyber Patriot. So, a better way to communicate that might be something like, hey, who might be interested in learning about computers? You guys interested in networking? Maybe some white hat hacking? Oh, sorry, white hat hacking. That's where the good guys do it. Yeah. Okay, so, Cyber Patriot is this competitive program from the Air Force Association that we have that, cadets learn about this sort of thing under guidance of a mentor, and you can explain it. Takes you 30 seconds to explain it. If 30 seconds is going to make or break the end of your meeting, maybe we got another problem. So break it down. Always think about this thing. And remember, communication, as we know, is a two-way street. Okay. Not only should you put out the message, but occasionally ask a question to check understanding and test your audience. So, say something like, who's into computers? Okay, now you got a segment of cadets who immediately go, they're talking about computers, and they're going to put their hand up, and now their interest is piqued. Whoa, here comes a message that might be directed at me, versus them standing there slack-jawed waiting for you to stop talking so they can do the formation thing and go home, right? Or you could say something like, okay, show of hands, who doesn't know what Cyber Patriot is? So now again, you're directing your message. You can gauge the relative knowledge level of your audience. I have a thing, we have a parade coming up, and my thing is that cadets show up to this parade every year and they don't bring black gloves with them. And it's in November, and in November in New England, it's cold. And so they show up and they don't have gloves on, and they're like, my hands are cold, sir, I don't understand. And so I always say, black gloves. And then I remind them, black gloves. And a couple weeks later, I'll say, and here's the parade. And don't forget, we bring black gloves. Or I'll say, what did I just tell you to bring? And I'll make sure that people repeat back, black gloves. So that's your checking understanding. You want to make sure that message got through. Chuck, you're absolutely right, by the way. Cyber defense, not offense. I stand corrected. So this is one of my pet peeves. And yeah, I blurred this shot up. This is actually a picture of one of my squadron meetings recently. Everybody kind of gathers around for the little announcements section of the meeting, maybe. How much real information is really being passed out when nobody is writing things down? If you've got 40 people standing there and you're like, and next week is Cyber Patriot on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, and don't forget, and bring a sack lunch and a pencil. If nobody is writing this down, how is anybody going to remember it? I mean, I have one of those notebooks that I carry around with me, and even if I don't necessarily always reference the notebook, at least I'm writing things down. This isn't so much a thing on communication, although it is. This is sort of the receiver side of the communication, how the receivers have an obligation to pay attention and listen and also take an active part in being part of the process. So if you're writing things down, chances are you're actually going to remember something, or at least you can look at your notebook and go, oh yeah, at 1900, not 1800. Great. So that's important. So these are some things, again, some ways that I've discussed here that we can sort of use communication and scheduling both kind of in concert with each other to improve your retention. Also, don't forget, I tell new squadron commanders this all the time. 3 things you can do as a squadron commander when you first hit the ground running is make sure people understand the standards, make sure they know where the regulations are. If the squadron does something a certain way, like, at 1800, we walk in the door and set up the computer so we can do sign in. So that's the way the squadron always does it. Whatever the standards is, make sure that if you have standards, people understand them. If you have a schedule, and then communicate both the standards and the schedule. And once you do that, man, things go downhill, or I shouldn't say downhill, but they get way easier when you're a commander. So real quick questions here. I'm looking at the chat here on the right side of the screen. Wow, you guys are really on it tonight. Just kidding. Let me see. I'm going to go back to the old webcam here. Let me minimize my screen. So move my other screen up in the front here. There we go. So yeah, the important thing though is that member satisfaction with a unit is important. A lot of times people leave and they say, oh yeah, I just couldn't find the time for Civil Air Patrol. Well, was it they couldn't find the time because there was too much going on? They couldn't find the time because they could never seem to synchronize their calendar and Civil Air Patrol's calendar? Did somebody not communicate very well with them about what was going on, so they never seemed to be on the ball as to what was happening? That's where it's important to really bring people on board. When you're talking particularly about new members, when they first start in the organization, they're malleable. I won't say they're like silly putty, but I mean they're like clay. You can do something with them, and you should do something with them, but you need to make sure that you're engaging them and participating with them, and you're not just leaving them hang out in the breeze. Let me see if I got any other questions. Oh, Pete Bowden, WEWAC, we were required to have a pen and notebook on us at all times to take notes. No kidding. That was exactly my squadron. You had to have a handkerchief, your Civil Air Patrol ID card, and a pen and paper. It wasn't in the regulations or anything like that. That was what my squadron did. But absolutely, I was scribbling that thing down. I may not always check my notebook. I've got this notebook, but I may not always open it up and look at it because, oops, I'm shaking the table here. Whoa, that's going to have to change. But I may not always have looked at my notebook, but at least the act of writing things down actually helped reinforce things in my head. It's not perfect, but it's there. Anita's got monthly senior command staff meeting outside of regular squadron meetings. Yep, absolutely. You got to plan ahead, and you got to do that planning, and it can't always happen in a squadron meeting. There's got to be some effort put forth to plan the meeting. You can't be at the meeting to plan the meeting. It seems like it makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't. Another question about closed Facebook groups. Stand by, I'm looking right now. Thanks. Oh, thoughts on communication venues such as a closed Facebook group for squadrons. My squadron has a closed Facebook group. I don't have any problem. Well, I might have a problem actually if my knucklehead friends up my communicator. Let's see. I'll do this comment. There we go. News and updates. I'll put this on the screen. Screen share. So this is an example, and I'll just use this again. Not perfect, but we have our news and updates page, and basically parents join the group. We have lots of members. We've got a lot of people from the squadron. Not always cadets, but parents who join the group, and then we make sure that we put things that are going on in here. So we have a photo that we took and thanked everybody who helped our open house last month. Our upcoming parade, which just got updated today. So now this is an event in Facebook, and somebody can say, yes, I'm going. Now, we also have a feedback for our parade. We also use like a Google form to catch feedback from people. So when people say, hey, yeah, I'm coming. Now I know I've got 19 cadets. Maybe I need to get 2 vans so I can transport people around. So let me go back to my screen here. So members aren't reading their emails. Okay, hold on a second. Let me back up to all the questions here. You guys are great. I love it. Actually, I'm going to bring this over here so it doesn't. You're not looking at the side of my head. Yeah, absolutely. You have to involve your cadet commander in the quarterly schedule. My deputy commander for cadets right now is doing the same thing. He's in the process of bringing this Thursday. He's bringing all the stakeholders into the room to talk about upcoming scheduling. So that's a good thing. So make sure you inform your senior members. Absolutely. If your senior members don't know, then they're the folks that are going to be actually making things happen. If you don't have 2 senior members in an event because you didn't tell everybody that something was going on, you might have a cadet protection issue. That's not going to be fun. Email, phone tree, it works. I tell you what, I've seen the efficacy of a phone tree drop off incredibly. And like somebody asked about people not reading their emails, especially cadets and parents. Part of the reason why we use a Facebook group is because a lot of people use Facebook more than they use email. Email which is weird to me, but email today is like something where you send it to somebody. Oh, I'll look at it in a couple days. Like they just let the mail pile up in their mailbox down at the end of the driveway. That freaks me out a little bit, but that's the way it is. That's how some people today use email. People use texting. People use Slack, although I don't think Slack exactly is the exact right platform for that. You want some persistence. You want it so that somebody's not there. They don't have to scroll back through 50 messages. They can just, oh, hey, look, there's the parade coming up on the 17th. Awesome. So let me see. Checking the rest of the questions here. Absolutely, Chuck. With regard to the Facebook environment, some people don't want to use Facebook, and that's exactly right. So, for an example, we have the Facebook page, we have a web page, we also send out emails, and we've been thinking about or looking into some maybe text messaging type services, but I'm always a little leery about that. I want to make sure you've got the ability to opt in, opt out, and stuff like that. And of course, there's costs associated with some of that kind of stuff. So it's again, 2 is 1, 1 is none, 3 is potentially guaranteed. And the thing is that if you have multiple avenues, then you can make sure that things happen. For example, it's coming into the winter time here in New England. So my squadron has a policy, which is one of our standards. Our policy is if there is a winter weather warning, not a watch, but a warning, overlapping any part of the meeting, um, then that meeting is considered to be canceled. So, if the winter weather warning goes till say 7 p.m., our meeting starts at 6:30, the meeting's canceled. But we also make sure we put that out when we notice that it's happening. We put that out via email. We put it on the Facebook group. We put it on the web page so that there's multiple ways that people will see this message. Again, yes, are there ways to do that via, like, say, text message? Sure, there's a couple, 3, 4 different options for that. So, Department of Redundancy Department. Thanks a lot there, Colonel Bowden. The Remind app, great. Brad, that's a great, that's one of the apps I was thinking of. Remind and they use those for schools and things like that. So, I send out emails, particularly for recruiting purposes, but also at a wing level. I send out emails using MailChimp. And people say, geez, why do you use that? It's so complicated to set up the email and blah, blah, blah. But I can see who opened my email. I can look at my click rate. I can see that, 43% of the people I sent the email to actually opened it. Or 43% read it, but only 25%, clicked further and opened the message. So it's one of those kinds of things that if you want to judge the efficiency or the efficacy of your communication channel, use a different tool that'll give you some metrics and you can see. Also, if somebody says, well, I never got the email, you can kind of go, well, look, on the 23rd, you got that email at 7:07 a.m. and then you opened it. And they go, oh, yeah, I guess I did look at that. So I've had that. It's always fun. So, but you're right. Email overload can be counterproductive. So in any event, so I don't want this to go much longer. I like to keep my webinars kind of short. This one's gone a little over 40 minutes at the moment. So I appreciate everybody being here tonight. You'll be able to view this webinar again, share this webinar again. I would, do the old like it and smash that like button and share or whatever, but I don't do that. But make sure you, if you like what you see and there's a playlist, you can find our playlist. So certainly look at our previous videos. And next month we're going to be doing another webinar. Actually, I'm going to try and schedule it for about 3 weeks, right after Thanksgiving. So we'll have another webinar on how you can retain members, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being here tonight. And I see that the chat is still going on. So, yeah, all right. But we'll look forward to talking to you next month. Thanks very much.